Good morning, folks. This week, week 5, I've asked you to watch a video by Alfie Kong and another video from ETS. One of the things I'm very concerned about, Dr. Kong's view of the LA Unified School District, I think is spot on. When you have a large district like LA Unified or other large school districts, and you have an over a 50% dropout rate. Some people say it's a 60% dropout rate. You really have some problems. And I know this is a cultural issue. I know that we have some very basic issues, but Cohen points out that the facilities are often horrific. It reminds me of Jonathan Coleswell in Savage Inequalities. And we have to ask ourselves, well, how can a school district that receives so much money from the state and the federal government, it has some of the highest paid teachers in the nation, how could you have a 60% dropout rate? What does this have to do with assessment? When we begin looking at these kinds of issues, we educators must pose a question: are we really meeting the needs of the students and the community that we're serving? Or what are we doing here? I met with a longtime councilman last week, and his daughter is a teacher, and he hangs around with a lot of his old cronies who are very conservative, and they argue that teachers are grossly overpaid. And he said, look, let's just pay them babysitting wages. Let's pay them $1 an hour. Now, most of them have 30 students in the class, so that's $30 an hour times 6 hours. That's $180 a day. So his old cronies were taken back by that analogy. Have we become that? What are we doing when we look at assessment? Are we really assessing the things that need to be assessed? Garner, in one of the videos you can find on Edutopia, talks about multiple intelligences. What are we assessing? What causes this problem when we're dealing with English language learners and special needs kids? It's hard to not want to say, well, we need to track kids. We need the old tracking system back where we can take kids and place them in a vocational track. Yeah, that's very appealing because some countries in the world do that, like Germany, and you found that out in 607. When we begin asking these kinds of questions, the validity of assessment, the validity of the type of assessment, how can we best serve our community? How can we best serve the students? Does everyone need to go to a 4-year college after graduation from high school? What are some of the things that we are really trying to do in our society? It harkens back to the class you took, Democracy in Education. And Democracy in Education, it's a very, very important class because it allows you to see that people in all areas of life are important to a democracy. Every trade, every craft, every degree is important as a person has the ability and the opportunity to develop their abilities. It's important in a society. One of the wonderful things about the United States we keep forgetting is that if you're 90 years old and you want to get a law degree and you want to go to Harvard, you can. A couple years ago, a woman that was 91 graduated from Harvard Law. Now, what she's going to do with the law degree at 91 is a different story, but the fact is she can return to school. There are very few countries in the world that allow adults to return to school. So, what's the push? How many of you return to school after a different career? When we begin thinking of this, and we begin thinking of how we assess, what we assess, and how we're meeting the needs of the community in face of the horrible statistics of LA Unified, 50 to 60% dropout rate. What do we do with that? How do we respond to that? I'd like you to think about that, and maybe collectively we can see that this is an answer. The answer that has to the answer to the problem has to come from us as educators rather than the politicians. We need to force some issues, but how do we force the issues? How do we encourage all those things like parental involvement, peer expectations? How do we assimilate minority cultures into the greater culture and the ideas? How do we teach kids the importance of education? How do we teach kids just the importance of even if it's technical education? Something to think about. Thanks.